The van ride was 13 hours from Madison, Wisconsin to Washington, D.C. Kevin and I had found a group that was going to the march on a bulletin board at the Student Union, and now here we were on our way to march on Washington for gay and lesbian rights. It was October of 1987, and Kevin and I had been dating for about a year or so. A lot is hazy from back then, as I was stoned out of my mind. I know that in the van were two lesbians, former lovers and now just friends, a gay guy who I'd known from the Progressive Student Network, and Kevin and me. We drove all the way through, and Kevin had brought about an ounce of weed with him, so again, things are a little foggy. Many things from this time of my life are pieced together, if not just invented completely. I know what plays I was in and who I slept with. I know that after 5 years at UW, I was a sophomore. And I know that Kevin Atkinson took my anal virginity. I know this because I kept journals then and was very specific about certain things. I even would make collages when I was tripping on acid or mushrooms, which was very, very often with Kevin. I'd been to Soho in Greenwich Village while I was in college, so I knew that multimedia collage could be very deep. When I look at the collages and journal entries now, it's with such pity for the boy I was in 1987. A whole 3-page spread is dedicated to my not-so-starring role in The Normal Heart at the university main stage. I played Tommy, a Southern nurse, in what can only be described as a skull-fucking of Uta Hagen and Stanislavski. Kevin brought me flowers for opening night because I told him that he had to. They were from the grocery store and had no card. But on a scrap of the paper the flowers were wrapped in, Kevin had written "For Jimmy Doyle" so the stage manager would know who to give them to. And so that was in a collage. Kevin had made some soup the day before, so the bag from the lentils is also in the collage, along with some of our pubic hair under Scotch tape, and a pink triangle drawn with crayon with "We Shall Overcome" written over it in ballpoint pen. All I need to make a grand occasion out of a bowl of soup and some flowers I'd coerced out of a man who didn't want me to refer to him as his boyfriend was some good dope and a glue stick. Kevin was the first guy who really appreciated me as the great cocksucker that I am. We would do bong hits from his 3-footer and turn on Pink Floyd's "Wish You Were Here" and spend upwards of 2 hours making out and exploring each other's bodies with our mouths and hands. Kevin's room had a queen-size bed and blackout curtains, so we could get baked and lock ourselves in there with Pink Floyd any time of the day or night, fucking for hours. How I wish I'd been there. When I say fucking, though, it's a colloquialism, because I'd never had the butt love in my life, and at 22, I felt that I was ready. The fact that Kevin had an enormous penis did get in the way somewhat, but this was back when you could still score Quaaludes. Unfortunately for me, the 3 guys I'd been with at 22 all had enormous cocks. I say unfortunately because it gave me an inferiority complex about my own normal dick that has survived to this day. I don't know what it is about me that draws the very well hung. I've come to just accept it as part of my lot in life. But for God's sake, Kevin's cock was ridiculous. And it wasn't even like the ridiculous kind on a skinny guy. He wasn't that skinny. Although at that time, I weighed 80 pounds less than I do now. Yeah, in 1987, I was the kind of kid you worried about. I wasn't even into speed either. I was a big fan of the downs, barbiturates, and opiates and the like. I can only imagine how Michael Stipe creepy I would have looked had I gotten into speed. By the way, for you young kids out there, it was called speed then. Not crystal or meth or whatever, just speed, the stuff that killed Edie Sedgwick. When you're on hallucinogens all the time, you find yourself making interesting fashion choices. One of my favorites back then was a pair of girls' capri pants, clam diggers we called them, a midriff-bearing sleeveless t-shirt, some rosaries, and a bridal veil. That's what I would enjoy wearing to the clubs or just to class in 1987. In the space of 4 years, I'd gone from preppy Catholic schoolboy to gender-fucking drug addict. My father lived outside of Washington, D.C. with my stepmother and her 2 youngest children. I didn't tell my father that I would be in D.C. I didn't even think of it. My father couldn't stand to look at me. And I don't mean that it felt that way. I mean that when I went to Virginia 2 Christmases prior to that year, he told me that he couldn't stand the sight of me, and I did nothing but embarrass him. What I didn't know in 1987 is that my father would only be alive for another 8 months. But had I known, I don't think I would have told him that I was going to march in Washington, D.C. for the right to get butt-fucked by my stoner boyfriend. My eldest brother, Billy, was in law school at Catholic University, and he had said that we could crash on his floor when we were in D.C., but he told me not to tell his housemates why we were there. They don't need to know your business, is how he put it. The day of the march was one of the most moving experiences of my life. The AIDS quilt was displayed there, and they had booths, actual booths, like kissing booths, but they were hug a person with AIDS booths. To hug a person with AIDS back then, even to call them people with AIDS instead of AIDS victims, was revolutionary. I felt part of a great mass of people crying out for civil rights, like those who'd marched the exact same route with Dr. Martin Luther King. 500,000 people marched in 1987 for gay and lesbian rights, led by a group of hundreds in wheelchairs who were dying of AIDS, followed by those more able-bodied holding the names of people who had wanted to march but were too weak. As we passed the White House with Ronnie and Nancy inside, we pointed our fingers and shouted, "Shame, shame, shame." We demanded AIDS funding. We demanded that Reagan actually utter the word AIDS. We demanded that we get some job protection, that we not be evicted from our homes if our landlords found out that we were gay. We did not ask for marriage rights. We wouldn't have even thought of such a thing. As my friend Thomas More put it, back then gay marriage was like science fiction. Wisconsin was one of the most popular contingents, and I do remember as we made our way to the mall where Martin Luther King had given his I Have a Dream speech, we were chanting, "Wisconsin, the gay rights state." Wisconsin at that time was the only state in the Union where you couldn't be fired from your job for being gay. It was a heady experience to see the P-Flag group, the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, the gay veterans, the ACT UP crowd, 500,000 people among whom I was not in the minority for the first time in my life. I could feel glimmers of hope, I think. I was really high. I didn't know in October of 1987 that I was going to lose my father, move to Chicago, lose Kevin, and get sober in the next year. I only knew that maybe there was some hope for me to have a happy life. I didn't know that I would continue to be with guys who didn't want to be with me until 2003, but then again, I didn't know that my brother Billy would work for the Democrats in 2004 because, as he put it, those assholes are trying to fuck with my little brother. I didn't know in October 1987 that in 20 years I would be loved by a man who wanted to be with me and that I would have the good sense to love him back. I didn't know that I would have a new religion and belong to a church that married same-sex couples. I sure as hell didn't know I would weigh this much. I didn't know that I would be 19 years sober, and I didn't know that I'd be planning a wedding to a man who knew me to the very core and still celebrated me, and who brought me flowers because he wanted to bring me flowers, not because I directed him to. I had no idea how long that march was to be when I took it in October of 1987. I was just there is all.